It happened on a Tuesday morning. Quiet, gray, forgettable, until it wasn't. I woke up in a room I didn't recognize. Pale walls. Plastic furniture. No front door key, no explanation. Just a bland nurse with a fake smile telling me, "You're safe now, Miss Greene." Safe from what? Myself? That's when it hit me. My own niece, Claire, had declared me mentally unfit. Used my brief hospital stay as an excuse. Took my house, my bank accounts, and dropped me in a nursing home. No warning. No hearing. No goodbye. I was supposed to fade quietly into the background. But they forgot one thing. I'm not just some frail old woman. I'm Eleanor Greene. I've buried worse than betrayal. I've built myself from scratch and burned down everything that stood in my way. And if they thought locking me in here would silence me, they were about to learn exactly who they were messing with. I wasn't always the woman who bought a nursing home just to fire the people running it. Once upon a time, I was just Eleanor Greene. South side of Chicago. Raised in a 2-bedroom apartment above a pawn shop. My mama cleaned houses, my daddy vanished before I could pronounce his name. I learned early, no one's coming to save you. You save yourself. I put myself through law school working nights as a waitress. Fought for women who were silenced, seniors who were cheated, kids who were forgotten. Built a reputation in the courtroom for being relentless, and I earned every wrinkle the hard way. I never married again after Henry passed. Never had kids either. My work was my legacy. My house, my books, my roses in the backyard. That was enough. Until I fell. Just a stupid slip in the kitchen. A cracked rib, a hospital stay, and a power-hungry niece with a signed guardianship form. Claire. She hadn't called me in 3 years. But the moment I was down, she showed up like a vulture. Told the doctors I was confused, alone, unstable. That I needed protection. Funny. I didn't feel protected when they stripped me of my rights and dumped me in a locked facility with stained carpets and alarms on every door. They thought they were doing what was best. Or at least, that's what they told themselves. But the truth? Claire didn't want to help me. She wanted to control me. What they didn't realize is, I've been underestimated my entire life. I built a career on turning powerlessness into power. On knowing when to keep quiet and when to strike. And this time, they handed me the perfect opportunity. They put me in a cage and left the lock in my hands. The first few days at Rosehill were the hardest. Not because of the bad food or the cold stares, but because of the silence. The kind of silence that creeps into your bones. The kind that whispers, "This is it. This is how your story ends." But I wasn't ready for my story to end. Not by a long shot. I started observing. Watching. Listening. It's funny what people will say in front of someone they think is irrelevant. I became invisible, and invisibility is power when you know how to use it. Staff argued in hushed voices about unpaid invoices. A man in a cheap suit came by one day and left red-faced after a meeting. Residents were being relocated with increasing frequency, except no one ever saw where they went. And then, I met Nico. He was a nurse's aide, young, sharp, and worn thin by too many double shifts. But unlike the others, he saw me. Not as a patient. Not as a problem. But as a person. One night, during medication rounds, he lingered a little longer and whispered, "Don't let this place eat you. It's rotten from the inside out." That was the moment the spark returned. Rotten from the inside out? Good. That means it's ready to collapse. I had my old laptop hidden in the lining of my suitcase, a backup Claire didn't know about. Took a while to get Wi-Fi working, but I've cracked worse systems. Within days, I was reading Rosehill's public filings, property records, and state inspection reports. The place was hemorrhaging money. Violations, lawsuits, unpaid suppliers. But the real gem? A buried public notice. The parent company had quietly listed Rosehill for sale in a bulk liquidation. It was on the chopping block, cheap, dirty, and fast. Most people would have seen a crumbling care facility. I saw a chessboard. I reached out to Ruth, an old friend and retired partner from my law firm days. I gave her power of attorney, told her to create a shell LLC, and made her promise not to ask too many questions. She didn't. Meanwhile, I started gathering internal dirt. Took notes on who mistreated patients, who falsified records, who siphoned money. I wasn't just planning a purchase. I was preparing a purge. They thought they'd buried me. What they didn't know was, I've always done my best work underground. And now? I wasn't just going to walk out of Rosehill. I was going to own it. The deeper I dug, the uglier it got. At first, I thought Rosehill was just poorly managed. But no, this wasn't neglect. It was a system built to break people, then bill them for it. There were residents without next of kin, quietly moved to off-site care. Except no one could tell me where off-site was. Their rooms were cleared overnight. No goodbyes. No explanations. Just gone. One woman, Dolores, used to sit by the window every morning. One day, she asked for help getting to the bathroom. They told her to wait. 4 hours later, a code blew. She never came back. That's when I knew. This place wasn't just a prison. It was a graveyard with air conditioning. I started keeping logs. Times. Names. Incidents. When Nico noticed, he started helping me. Slipping me internal memos, voicing what he couldn't say out loud. He told me the administrator, a smug man named Preston, was cutting corners on medical supplies to pad his own bonus. That expired meds were being relabeled. That they were understaffed by design. He's betting nobody will notice, Nico said. Or care. But I noticed. I cared. And I knew exactly how to build a case that would stick. Every day, I played my role. Confused old woman. Tells the same stories. Misplaces her glasses. But behind the scenes, I was piecing together a legal bomb strong enough to blow the whole operation wide open. And still, Claire kept her distance. I'd get monthly updates from her lawyer, cold, clinical, full of language like in her best interest. My house was up for sale. My accounts had been consolidated under Claire's name. She thought I was out of the picture. That the inheritance she couldn't wait for was finally within reach. She didn't know I'd already moved my assets. That Ruth and I had been 3 steps ahead. She didn't know I had recorded every call, every financial transfer, every decision she made while I was unfit. She didn't know the lion was still very much alive, just quiet in the tall grass. But the day was coming. The day when the papers would be signed. The sale would go through. And the key to the very cage they put me in would be dropped right into my hand. They were watching me like a patient. But I was watching them like a prosecutor. And soon, I'd have everything I needed to strike. It all came to a head on a Wednesday afternoon. Rain tapped the windows like a metronome, ticking down to the moment everything changed. I was in the activity room, pretending to knit. No one paid me any attention. That was the beauty of being invisible, they never saw you coming. Nico slid a folder under my blanket. Inside were emails between Preston, the administrator, and the parent company. Subject line: Final liquidation terms approved. Property must be off our books by end of quarter. Translation? Rosehill was being dumped. Fast. Quiet. Dirty. And the buyer listed on the closing documents? An LLC I'd set up weeks ago with Ruth. The final contract was just waiting for a signature. All we had to do was say yes. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Claire had just wired a large chunk of my estate into her own account, for management purposes, of course. We had the proof. The transfer. The forged consent. The signature that didn't match mine. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the thrill. The thrill of watching your enemy walk into a trap you laid calmly and silently. That evening, I asked Nico to help me dress a little differently. Not the usual robe and slippers, but something closer to who I used to be. Slacks. A blazer. Earrings. He didn't ask why. He just smiled and said, "You look like you're about to change everything." The next day, the board met with the new buyer, expecting a disinterested investor or faceless property flipper. What they got was me. I walked into that room, head high, papers in hand, and watched every jaw in that room drop. Preston looked like he'd seen a ghost. Claire, who'd stormed in behind me after hearing rumors, turned the color of raw dough. I dropped the signed documents on the table. "I am the new owner of Rosehill," I said. "Effective immediately." Preston sputtered. Claire tried to shout. I stayed calm. Cold. Precise. Then came the second envelope. Legal reversal of Claire's guardianship. Filed. Stamped. Finalized. Along with a lawsuit for elder financial abuse. Ruth entered behind me like the closing bell in a courtroom. I turned to the board. Everyone responsible for what's happened here is finished. And those who've been silent? It's time to speak up or step out. They tried to cage me. Strip me of dignity. But they forgot, I don't break. I build. And now, I wasn't just walking out free. I was walking out in charge. The news spread through Rosehill like wildfire. Within hours of signing the final documents, I held an emergency staff meeting in the very room where they used to lecture us like school children. But this time, I was the one holding the clipboard. I looked around at the faces, some shocked, some terrified, some quietly hopeful. Then I read out the names. Preston? Fired. On the spot. Security escorted him out while he shouted something about corporate overreach. I didn't even flinch. 2 nurses who had falsified charts to avoid liability? Terminated with evidence in hand. The medical director who hadn't shown up in person for 3 months? Gone. But not everyone faced the door. Nico, the only staff member who showed consistent compassion, got a promotion, head of resident care. I offered to pay his nursing school tuition in full, under one condition: he promised never to forget what it felt like to be ignored. He nodded, eyes glassy. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. Then came the residents. I met with each one personally over the course of 2 weeks. Sat by their bedsides, listened to their stories. Apologized to the ones who had been mistreated. Reunited families that had been pushed away under false dementia labels. One man, Thomas, cried when I showed him his confiscated war medals. They'd been locked away for safety. I pinned them back on his shirt myself. The food changed. The schedules changed. The alarms were reprogrammed. The doors were still secure, but now people had access to the outside, escorted walks, sunlight, real air. We hired new therapists. Changed the visitation policies. Added book clubs, art classes, a piano in the lounge. The halls didn't feel so heavy anymore. And Claire? Well, she didn't go quietly. But the moment the court saw the documentation, my medical evaluations from private doctors, the financial transfers, the fraud, they revoked her guardianship permanently. She faced criminal charges for elder exploitation and breach of fiduciary duty. Funny thing is, she still tried to paint herself as the victim. Said she was just trying to help. Help doesn't look like taking someone's home and selling their memories to the highest bidder. Help doesn't come with a price tag. She's gone now. Out of my life. Out of my will. Good riddance. As for the community? Word spread beyond Rosehill. Local news picked up the story. Elderly woman turns the tables, buys her own nursing home. It went viral. Emails poured in from people I'd never met, seniors who felt seen, daughters who feared losing their mothers to the same system, even attorneys who wanted to help reform guardianship laws. A senator reached out. I sent him my file. Told him to read it all before our call. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. Rosehill, now renamed Greenhouse, became the start of something bigger. A new standard. A warning shot. A living, breathing declaration: we will not be silenced. We don't age out of our rights. And if you try to erase us, you just might find yourself erased instead. What they tried to destroy is now thriving. Because I didn't just fight back. I rebuilt the battlefield. And this time, it's ours. It's funny how fast a place can change when people actually care. 3 months after I took ownership, Rosehill was unrecognizable, not in design, but in energy. The halls were quieter in the right way. Not silent with fear, but calm with dignity. Greenhouse wasn't just a clever rebrand. It was a promise. A reminder that this place was no longer a holding pen for forgotten lives, it was a home. Residents who hadn't spoken in weeks started opening up. You'd hear laughter in the dining hall, music from the rec room, and conversation during art sessions. One afternoon, I found Mrs. Elkins, who'd once refused to leave her room, teaching younger aides how to crochet. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "Thank you for seeing me," she said. "I didn't bring you back," I told her. "You were just waiting for someone to unlock the door." We started receiving requests from other facilities, people wanting to train under our model. Nurses. Administrators. Even medical students who realized elder care wasn't just about medication, it was about respect. Greenhouse became a pilot for a new type of care system. One that valued freedom over fear. We added a small garden where residents could grow herbs and vegetables. A therapy dog started making weekly visits. And with help from Ruth, we created a legal aid desk inside the building, offering free consultations to seniors and their families about guardianship rights. That desk was always full. Outside the walls, things changed too. Claire's trial made headlines in elder advocacy circles. The footage of her being confronted with forged signatures and sealed bank transfers went viral. People started asking questions about how guardianship laws are abused. Lawmakers started calling. I testified twice. Once in court, and once in front of a policy committee. I told them the truth. That this isn't rare. That every day, capable, lucid elders are being silenced under the guise of protection. That family doesn't always mean love. That the law needs to listen harder. They listened. At least some of them did. But none of that was what I was most proud of. What mattered most to me was watching a woman named Gloria, who once flinched every time someone touched her shoulder, sit calmly during a group massage therapy session. Or hearing Thomas, the veteran, lead morning roll call in the lounge like he was back in uniform, loud, proud, alive. These weren't miracles. These were returns. People don't disappear as they age. They're still in there, waiting to be respected, not just managed. I still live here, by the way. I converted one of the unused administrative apartments into a cozy space with a view of the front gardens. Sometimes people ask why I stay. Why not go back to my house, now that everything's settled? Because this is my house. My mission. My community. And because I want to be here to make sure it stays that way. Some nights, I sit by the window with a cup of tea and watch the sunset over the lawn where the residents gather for evening walks. I don't feel like a prisoner anymore. I feel like a guardian. The real kind. The kind that protects, empowers, and never forgets. My story could have ended the day they put me in that ambulance. But instead, it began again, with fire in my chest and justice on my heels. They underestimated the power of a woman with nothing left to lose and everything left to say. And I'm still saying it. They thought they were closing a chapter on my life. But they were only turning the page to the part where I wrote the ending myself. What happened to me could have happened to anyone. And it is happening, quietly, legally, every single day. Seniors stripped of their rights. Declared incompetent without real evidence. Removed from their homes. Their voices drowned out by paperwork, protocols, and the greed of people who smile in family photos but sharpen knives behind closed doors. That's the part that hurts the most. It wasn't a stranger who did this to me. It was family. But I don't share this story for pity. I share it because we need to stop pretending this is rare. We need to talk about guardianship abuse. About how for your own good has become a phrase that cages more people than it saves. And we need to stop measuring a person's value by how young, fast, or profitable they are. We don't outgrow our dignity. If anything, we earn it, one scar, one fight, 1 year at a time. I'm not special because I fought back. I'm lucky that I had the tools, the training, and the right people to help me do it. But there are thousands who don't. They're sitting in silence, right now. In rooms that smell like disinfectant and forgotten dreams. Waiting for someone to notice they're still in there. So, if you're watching this, I have a favor to ask. If you have an elder in your life, listen. Not with assumptions. Not with pity. With presence. Ask how they feel. Ask what they want. And believe them when they tell you. If you see something wrong in a care facility, don't look away. Report it. Speak up. And if you work in this system, be the exception. Be the Nico. The Ruth. The one who sees the person, not the patient. And finally, if you're someone like me, if you've been pushed aside, ignored, underestimated, know this. You are not done. You are not broken. You are not invisible. Your voice still matters. Your story still counts. And the fight in you? It's still there. Use it. Because the moment we stop believing in our power, is the moment they win. And we didn't survive all this time just to give them that satisfaction. So share this story. Start the conversation. Protect the ones who came before us. And never forget, dignity doesn't expire. Not at 70. Not at 90. Not ever.